If the monster is a ghost thing, may not she be one too? If we are to believe in such things at all, she almost seems to intend that you shall believe her the ghost of the witch girl in that old book." I shook my head with the helpless feeling of trying to explain some abstruse knowledge to a child. I had spoken of the colossal spaces, the solemn immensities of the place where I had set my human foot. I had tried to paint the desolate bleakness of that borderland where the unnamed thing and I met, each beyond his own law decreed boundary, and locked in combat bitter and strong. Phillida had listened, and talked of ghosts, the bugbears of graveyard superstition. Did Vere comprehend me better? Did he visualize the struggle, weirdly akin to legends of knight and dragon, as prize of which waited Desire Michell, forlornly helpless as white Andromeda chained to her black cliff? Could the Maine countryman, the cabaret entertainer, seize the truths glimpsed by Rosicrucians and mystics of lost cults, when the highly bred college girl failed? It seemed so. At least his dark eyes met mine with intelligence; hers held only bewilderment and fear. "They are not ghosts," I said, only. "But how can you be sure?" she persisted. Beneath the braid and the pomander lay the sheet of paper on which Desire had written weeks before, the first page of that composition now pouring gold into my hands. This I passed to Phillida. "Do ghosts write?" I queried. She read the lines aloud. "We walk upon the shadows of hills, across a level throne, and pant like climbers. They do write, people say, with Ouija boards and mediums," she murmured. I looked at Vere with despair of sustaining this argument. He stood up as if my appeal had been spoken, drawing her with him. "Now that it's a decent hour, don't you think Cristina might give us some breakfast?" he suggested. "I guess bacon and eggs would be sort of restoring. If you feel up to taking my arm as far as the porch, Mr. Locke, the fresh air might be good medicine, too." I have speculated sometimes upon how civilized man would get through days not spaced by his recurrent meals into 3 divisions. Those meals are hyphens between his mind and his body, as it were. What sense of humor can view too intensely a creature who must feed himself 3 times a day? Are we not pleasantly urged out of our heroics and into the normal by breakfast, luncheon and dinner? Deny it as we will, when we do not heed them we are out of touch with nature. We went downstairs. After breakfast was over, Vere and I walked across the orchard to a seat placed near the lake. There I sat down, while he remained standing in his favorite attitude, one foot on a low boulder, his arm resting on his knee as he gazed into the shallow, amber tinted water. Fog still overlay the countryside, but without bringing coolness. The damp heat was stifling, almost tropical as the sun mounted higher in the hidden sky. I watched my companion, waiting for him to speak. He appeared intent upon the darting movements of a group of tiny fish, but I knew his thoughts were afar. "Mr. Locke, I didn't want to speak before Phillida, because it would not do any good for her to hear what I have to say," he finally began. "It is properly the answer to what you asked upstairs, about our believing you had not imagined that story. Did anything slip out over the window sill when you were waking up?" Startled, for I had not spoken of this, I met his gaze. "Yes. Did you see—" "Nothing exactly. Something, though. Like Well, like something pouring itself along. A big, thick mass. Something sort of smooth and glistening, like black, oily molasses slipping over. Only alive somehow, drawing coils of itself out of the dark, into the dark. I can't put it very plain." "What did you think?" "The air in the room was bad and close, hard to breathe. I guessed maybe I was a little dizzy, jumping out of bed the way I did and finding you like dead almost." He paused and returned his contemplation to the fish darting in the lake. "That is what I thought," he concluded. "What I felt, well, it was the kind of scare I didn't use to know you could feel outside of bad dreams, the kind you wake up from all shaking, with your face and hands dripping sweat. That isn't all, either." This time the pause was so long that I thought he did not mean to continue. "My excuse for speaking of such matters before Phillida is that I may need a woman friend for Desire Michell," I reverted to the implied rebuke I acknowledged his right to give. "I wanted her help, and yours. More than ever, since you have shared my experience so far, I want your advice." "I'll be proud to give it, in a minute. First, it's only fair to say I've felt enough wrong around here to be able to understand a lot that once I might have laughed at. Nothing compared to you, but I've been working about the lake sometimes after dark, or before daylight was strong, when a kind of horror would come over me. Well, I'd feel I had to get away and into the house or go crazy. That morning when you called from your window to ask where I'd been so early, and I told you looking for turtles, that was one time. I had gone out looking for turtles, but that horror drove me in. When you hailed me, I had it so bad that I could just about make out not to run for the house like a scared cat, yelling all the way. Turning back to the lake with you was a poser. But I did, and the feeling was all gone as quick as it came. We had a nice morning's shooting. Once in a while I've felt it sort of driving me indoors when I stepped off the porch or over to the barn at night. That's a funny thing, the fear was always outside, not in the house. I thought of that while you were telling us how the thing at the window kept trying to get in at you. We haven't got a haunted house, but a haunted place." "Why have you not spoken of this before?" I asked, deeply stirred. He made a gesture, too American to be called a shrug. He said nothing, watching a large bubble rise through the pure, brown green water, float an instant on the surface, then vanish with the abrupt completeness of a miniature explosion. I watched also, with an always fresh interest in the pretty phenomenon. Then I repeated my question, rather impatiently as I considered what a relief his companionship in experience would have afforded all these weeks. "Why not, Vere? Mr. Locke, I don't like to keep saying that you never exactly got used to me as your cousin's husband," he reluctantly replied. "But I can see it's a kind of surprise to you right along that I don't break down or break out in some fashion. Of course I haven't known that you were meeting queer times, too. If you hadn't been through any of this, what would you have thought if I'd come to you with stories of the place being haunted by something nobody could see? You would have judged I was a liar, trying to fix up an excuse for getting away from the work here and shoving off. I don't want to go away. I don't intend to go. I can't see any need of it for Phil and me. But, and this is the advice you spoke of, I think you ought to leave and leave now. It's little better than suicide to